Why don't we have a mass exodus of failed officials? The debacle of Syria. We're told now that the U.S. has 9, count them, 9 Pentagon-funded moderate terrorist rebels. Boy, if the Russians can find 9 moderate terrorist rebels, that's a needle in a haystack. Those Russians must have some kind of GPS or guidance system if they can find 9 terrorist rebels. Now, of course, the claim coming from Walnuts McCain and others is that the Russians have bombed the moderate terrorist rebels, his friends, he claims, that are funded by the Pentagon. So, I'm sorry, funded by the CIA. The Pentagon-funded ones are 9. The CIA ones, where they don't do any vetting, those are more numerous. And those are getting clobbered, of course, because they're in a revolving door. They're in the same revolving door with the ISIS killers. So, right now we've got a race. And my zinger on this is to the Pentagon. If you don't keep pace, you will lose face. Pentagon, get in there and bomb ISIS, right? You're so great. You got the greatest military. Tell us, show us. Don't let the Russians hog all the glory. Get in there and make your own contribution too. Let's have a peace race. Who can clobber ISIS? Because that's what we need. The Russian bombing looks very capable. We're now in the 3rd day of the bombing. It was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Good results. 12 targets now, including Raqqa, the capital. And we've got, however, an absurd piece of idiot diplomacy. 6 countries, including the unfortunate Madame Merkel, say stop doing it. We'll be back in just a minute with this on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So, the Russian Federation is doing an effective job. This is serious bombing now. These are not the pinpricks and phony war appeasement strategies imposed by now departing ISIS czar Allen. This is serious bombing. And then we've got the Western whiners who were not strong enough to oust Allen for 12 months. Now it seems to be done. So we've got the countries that are saying to the Russian Federation, stop doing it. United States, United Kingdom, Federal Republic of Germany, France, Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi. They all say, stop. You might hurt those terrorist rebels. Those are moderate terrorist rebels. The official U.S. position comes down to saying, you can bomb ISIS, but you can't bomb Al-Qaeda. Let's send a letter to all of the 3,000 9/11 families and show them that the current bombing policy does not allow anybody from Al-Qaeda to get clobbered. And instead, that is what has to happen. So Walnuts McCain, the man who cavorts with cannibals, caliphs, and kidnappers, as he did, arrest McCain for ISIS. Once again, we're back to the same slogan. By the way, McCain now has a primary opponent. He might be in trouble for next year. This is where reactionaries, evil people, can do good by opposing McCain. So he's complaining about that. The CIA unvetted rebels exist cheek by jowl with the ISIS people and the Al Qaeda people. So they're simply inseparable. So this is a bunch of malarkey, and it gets very close once again to public support for terrorism. That the U.S. is going to say our foreign policy is based on ISIS and Al Qaeda, which unfortunately has to some degree been the case. Now, the Russians, what are they doing? It's very obvious. You have got to stabilize Assad first. The main bulwark protecting the world from the ISIS butchers and madmen is the Syrian Arab army. And I've learned to respect them. As I think I mentioned a couple of times, I visited a military hospital in Damascus in November of 2011. I was impressed by the bravery, by the sense of duty of the wounded soldiers that I had there, and I told every one of them, to the extent that I could, you are in the front line of civilization, and there are at least some people in the Western world who understand your sacrifice and who thank you for it and are grateful because you're the front line against civilization, the point where civilization collides with barbarism. So you're in the front line. So what Russia has been doing, quite obviously, is to bomb the most advanced rebel positions, not really caring whether it's ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Nusra or this phantomatic Free Syrian Army, or whether it's one of the 150 to 200 other groupings of lunatics. Remember, the principle for Syria is this. The opposition is in parliament. There are opposition deputies in there. They're in there. So they can, if you want to oppose Assad, you can do it. When I went to Homs, the governor of Homs had a communist and a wealthy woman, and they represented different opposition groups, and we talked to them. And that was the opposition then and now. A lot of opposition groups have realized the gaping abyss below them if they get caught up into ISIS, so they've come back to the parliament. Anybody out in the countryside or in a city with armed opposition is a terrorist. It's just that simple. If you've got a Kalashnikov out in the slums or the countryside, you're a terrorist, and that makes you fair game. So Russia bombing the advanced rebel positions, protecting Assad. If there's any question of the collapse of Assad, the whole thing is over. You've got to have a ground force. Remember, the bombing works best when you've got ISIS bunched up against the Syrian Arab Army or the Kurds or Hezbollah or Iran. And we're hearing now that there will be a joint effort. It's even possible that China could join in it. This would make the world consensus overwhelming. The United States simply cannot go on with a foreign policy based on supporting terrorist groups. It's just that simple. It's got to end. And the people who are arguing for this are lunatics, and they've got to be fired. And that's Newland and Power and quite a few others. I forgot to say Ambassador McGurk, the scurrilous sort of, what can we say, a personality out of Boccaccio's Decameron. This McGurk has been calling himself ambassador when he really doesn't have a permanent title. So he's a fraud. Don't let McGurk take over Allen's job. He'll simply continue the wreckage wrought by Allen. Now, there's a conference going on today in Paris. It's a summit. It is Germany with Merkel, France with Hollande, Putin for the Russian Federation, and Poroshenko for Ukraine. This is billed as a Ukraine conference, but now the linkage between Syria and Ukraine is overwhelming because you've got to get Russian help into Syria to destroy ISIS, stop the civil war. Therefore, you've got to end the economic sanctions on Russia, end the economic sanctions on Syria, and then proceed to cooperate, open diplomatic relations with Assad. Merkel is now saying she needs Russia to solve the Syrian question. Merkel has now also said that Germany wants to cooperate with Assad. So cooperate. Open your embassy. Send weapons to Assad. Help Assad. Arrest the various Free Syrian Army terrorists on German territory while you still have a chance. One speculation, of course, is that the CIA response to all this is that the CIA will try to strike in southern Russia, be it Chechnya, be it these other border areas in the Caucasus, Transcaucasus, North Caucasus, or, as we've seen, some city in southern Russia or something of this kind. In other words, to act this out. The group meeting in Paris is officially the continuation of Minsk II, to oversee the fulfillment of the Minsk II Accords, which, on the whole, have been successful. So this is going on today. Of course, we have to remember, right? Not all rebels are supplied through Turkey. We have other groups of rebels in southern Syria. Indeed, this is where the troubles began. That are supplied through Jordan. So don't forget Jordan. And the outlook of Jordan is not so different from the outlook of the Saudi monarchy, right, based on tribes in Jordan. Now, the other thing to remember, there never was a peaceful phase. For the 99 millionth time, there never was this halcyon days. We're hearing about this on National Pentagon Radio this morning, NPR, the Diane Rehm Show, International Review. There never was a peaceful phase. The rebels were shooting from the first day, from the word go, going back to 1982. Back a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington. It's the afternoon of October 2nd, 2015. And, of course, we just come from our unique Welcome Putin demonstration. The Tax Wall Street Party, United Front Against Austerity, was the only organization in North America to stage a Welcome Putin greeting in Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza near the United Nations. We want to thank the Belarusian television for being there. We want to thank Press TV of Iran for being there, and a couple of people associated with Russia today. But we also deplore the incomprehensible editorial policy of Russia Today that ignored, in effect, on their air, the only pro-Putin demonstration. What is wrong with that policy? Or better, you should ask what's right with it, because it's just incomprehensible. Lots of time for Rand and Ron and Assange and Snowden, but not enough time for people who actually have some positive idea of Russia. Anyway, that will not stop us. We will simply escalate until some of these people hopefully see the light. We're told that there's a coordination in Baghdad. There's a kind of a committee that meets there, or a kind of a continuous consultation process. And that would be Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Russia. So they're coordinating. Why doesn't the U.S., why don't the British, French, and U.S. join that coordination so that you can actually conduct a war on terror? What's illegitimate? If Nusra is threatening to overthrow the Assad regime, which I don't believe, but if they were, it would make a whole lot of sense. It would be imperative to bomb the heck out of Nusra, because you've got to keep the Syrian Arab army in the field, well-stocked, good morale, and fighting qualities, because they have all this. They will defend themselves, right? This is not the Afghan army, it's not the Iraq army, this is the Syrian one, and they fight. So let's start cooperating. Now, we're told, what's the mood in the Pentagon? We're told, first of all, that a lot of U.S. military officers are defeatist. They say, oh, gosh, we don't even know how to defeat ISIS. I'll tell you how to defeat ISIS. 1,000-bomber raid in a day. You could do that, right? Maybe you couldn't put 1,000 in the air all at once like you did at the beginning of the first Gulf War in 1991. 1,000-bomber raid, clobber ISIS, wipe them out. This can be done. Force Turkey to close the border. And cooperate with Russia, cooperate with Assad, arm Assad, dump the Free Syrian Army, right? Those guys are lounge lizards in the 4-star hotels of the Middle East. So we're told that there's defeatism. I think that defeatism is opposed, that this is simply their way of saying, we're appeasers. We believe in the phony war. You got to get rid of officers that are sympathetic to Petraeus and Allen and this Breedlove, this guy. Breedlove is another person on the list of those who should be spending more time with their families. Now, we're also told that in the Pentagon and to some degree in the White House, there are people who are hoping that Putin will find a quagmire. Well, you can see he put his base in the middle of the Alawites, so no terrorists are going to have an easy time getting to the Russian base. And other than that, he's going to use air power, and the ground forces will once again be Syrian, Hezbollah, Iranian, Iraqi. Iraq has invited Russia to bomb ISIS in Iraq because the Allen policy of phony war and appeasement has been so wretched, so impotent and pathetic that the Iraqis can see that the U.S. is not helping them in the way the U.S. obviously could. The great military establishment that rolled over Saddam Hussein in 6 weeks and all the rest of this stuff is now checkmated by a rabble of ragtag psychotic killers. And again, they're not even the JV. They're the intramural teams. They're a big nothing. National Pentagon Radio is also very unhappy with General Sisi. And they are really distorting the facts about this. Inside the U.S., we've got a slow process of adjusting opinions to the new realities. Realistic thinking is creeping into The Nation. They have an article about how to end the Syrian civil war, which is an extremely tentative and cautious opening to Assad. Well, we have to tell the Europeans, right, Merkel and company, scream louder, make that objection known, and please, Merkel, at least Merkel, don't sign a document saying that Russia should stop bombing the ISIS people. What is that? Or any terrorist rebel you find. It's just crazy. But anyway, things are moving, and you can already see the outlines of a new world, a bipolar world, and it's going to be better. Trust me, it's going to be better. Show us. Don't let the Russians hog all the glory. Get in there and make your own contribution too. Let's have a peace race. Who can clobber ISIS? Because that's what we need. The Russian bombing looks very capable. We're now in the third day of the bombing. It was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Good results. 12 targets. Why don't we have a mass exodus of failed officials? The debacle of Syria. We're told now that the U.S. has 9 Pentagon-funded moderate terrorist rebels. Boy, if the Russians can find 9 moderate terrorist rebels, that's a needle in a haystack that are funded by the Pentagon. So, I'm sorry, funded by the CIA. The Pentagon-funded ones are 9. The CIA ones, where they don't do any vetting, those are more numerous. And those are getting clobbered, of course, because they're in a revolving door. They're in the same revolving door with the ISIS killers. Those Russians must have some kind of GPS or guidance system if they can find 9 terrorist rebels. Now, of course, the claim coming from Walnuts McCain and others is that the Russians have bombed the moderate terrorist rebels, his friends, he claims, so right now we've got a race, and my zinger on this is to the Pentagon. If you don't keep pace, you will lose face. Pentagon, get in there and bomb ISIS, right? You're so great. You got the greatest military. Show us.